Welcome to Just Thinking. This is Mary Greendale. The title of this show grew out of a lifetime of curiosity about many different subjects. Some local, some global, and some in between. For each show, I will open with my thoughts and then bring on guests to explore the subject in greater detail. I hope the show inspires healthy discussions on camera and among viewers. To me, the sky's the limit when we are just thinking. So I'm here at the Congregational Church, sitting in their beautiful parlor, because that was the easiest space that we could find, with Matt Putvinski and his little friend, Gabriel. Gabriel is being trained as a service dog with the NEEDS organization. And I went back and looked up what NEEDS stood for last night. What is it? National
Education for Assistant Dog Services.
Not an easy flow off the tongue name, but at any rate. My family has experience with NEEDS. We actually have a social dog in our family. She's been in our life for 9 years, and I can't say enough for what a service dog can do for an autistic child in terms of improving social skills and making life just a little more comfortable. So anyway, I wanted to talk to Matt about his job as a foster weekend parent. Tell me what it is that you do exactly.
So as part of the NEEDS program, we use what's called the prison pup program. So the dogs in NEEDS are actually trained in the prisons around Massachusetts. And what they do is they train inmates to train the dogs. And so Gabriel spends his weeks at Framingham MCI, which is down the street here. And so the trouble with training them in the prisons, though, is they don't necessarily get the socialization that they need. They obviously can't go to restaurants, they can't get in cars, they can't go to stores. So NEEDS has volunteers like myself who are weekend puppy raisers, and our job is to take the dogs out into the environment, basically simulate situations where eventually, if he's assigned to a client, he'll go to. So last night we went to Staples and did some shopping. We go to malls, we go to gas stations, we go to restaurants, and basically my job is to make sure that Gabriel is comfortable in every environment so that, again, when he's assigned to a client, that client may be at the mall, the dog's already familiar with that experience. And so NEEDS provides us with a long list of places that we bring the dogs and provide the training.
Gabriel is mad, or you want to? Gabriel has a little girl along with him, really. She's actually a big girl. She's a teenager, and Matt's daughter, Caitlin. And it's clear that the dog would rather have Caitlin come over and talk to us, but Caitlin doesn't want to. Anyway. So how long have you been a foster parent?
So I got Gabriel last March, so it's been a year now since we've been helping working with Gabriel. He came to us as a 4-month-old puppy.
Oh, wow.
And so we've been working with him throughout the year, and it's just amazing to see his growth, his maturity. He picks up things very, very, very well. He's a very social dog, as you can see. But so we've been with the program for about a year now.
Does he live during the week at the prison in the cell with someone?
Yep, he's literally assigned to an inmate, and that inmate has it's considered a perk for the inmate to have a companion. And so his crate will be in the cell with that inmate, and he will spend all the time learning from that inmate. So it's almost like a win-win for not only for the program to be able to have access to great trainers, but we can also let the inmate give back to society a little bit.
And there may be a future in that, really. I mean, when you think about it, as the inmate is released.
That's a good point, because Gabriel's inmate, this is actually our fourth dog that she's been training, so she can easily look for a career outside of the prison into something like this. So.
Yeah, animals do so much for you, too. So what is this thing around his nose. Does that hurt?
No, what it's called a gentle leader. It often looks like a muzzle, which is definitely not needed by Gabriel because he doesn't have an aggressive bone in his body. But this gentle leader helps train with walking. So it doesn't hurt. What it does, though, is if he starts pulling away from me, it'll put a little bit of pressure on the back of his neck and keep him from pulling. So then he'll stay to my side, which you want the service dogs to learn how to just walk with their client or their person or their human side by side. So it's just a training tool to keep him from straying too far from me.
I know nowadays Jake, my grandson's dog, whose name is Basket, we have no idea where the name came from, but you either love it or hate it. She doesn't use her uniform anymore, truthfully, and now that Jake is 17, she has become just the house pet. Mm-hmm. If we bring out that gentle lead and she sees it, her head immediately goes like that. She puts her nose almost down to the floor. She does not want to put that back on. But if you put her clothes on her, if you put her jacket on her and you put her lead on her and everything, she's right back. I mean, it's like, bink, okay, I'm working. But like every one of us, she's gone into retirement and doesn't like putting on the jacket. So at any rate, how does one get to be a participant in this? I know how you get to have a dog, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But how do you get to be a participant at your level?
So their needs is always looking for volunteers to help with the program. We have dogs across the state in multiple prisons. I had learned from the program from a friend of mine who was on his second dog that he's been training. And basically you can go online, neads.org, neads.org, and apply to be a weekend puppy raiser, along with other ways if you're interested in helping the program. And experience, they'll train you. You don't have to be a dog trainer. By no means am I a professional dog trainer. They will provide the training and the orientation to make sure you're as comfortable as possible doing it, but also providing the structure that the dogs need to really learn how to be service dogs.
Now, when you came into this room, I noticed that it was your daughter that was walking the dog, and I know that from talking to you both that she's over at Norfolk Aggie working in the field of canines. That's her primary interest. Did that play into your decision at all in this choice?
It definitely did. There was two things that played into the decision. Was one, we love dogs, but we don't necessarily have the flexibility during the week to have a dog during the week. So having a weekend dog was very helpful. But my daughter Caitlin is very interested in it, and she is in the canine program at the Aggie, so I thought this would be an ideal opportunity for her to get some experience. And, at some point, if she wants to continue, to just put it on her resume as well.
Yeah, it's really a good idea. Okay, so now in terms of the training that you undertook, how long did that take?
It's basically fairly simple. It's a 3 or 4 hour orientation program. So we go out to the campus in Princeton, and they provide not only the training, but all the materials and everything I need. And then once a month, we actually, the weekend puppy raisers get together with one of the folks from Needs and just constantly continue the training. So last month we met at the Natick Mall. This month we're heading over to the Framingham Tea Station. So we just so that's the orientation, and then every month the Needs program comes out and helps with anything we may be struggling with or need help with.
How often? Are you every weekend? Is it every weekend of every month?
Yep. So if they ask the volunteers to commit to at least 3 weekends a month. Mm-hmm. Because they really need this exposure, and it is as many weekends as you can. So there was a period of time where we had them for every weekend, and then recently over the holidays we had to miss a couple of weekends. But basically, you plan to pick them up on Friday, and then drop them off Sunday night at the prison.
Now, you're picking him up at MCI, but is it possible somebody would have to go a longer distance to get a dog from a different prison?
We do. We have dogs at Gardner. We have dogs in Norfolk. We have dogs down in Cranston, Rhode Island. So there is a potential that if you may be offered a dog and there may be a drive, but they generally try to keep it local to your residents.
Okay. Now, what do you have to teach? I understand that your responsibility is to get him to be socialized with other people, but specific skills, what do you have to reinforce with him?
Yeah, most of the reinforcement is, and I equate it to raising kids. There's a little bit of discipline that has to go. So for example, the dogs can never jump on furniture. They can't sleep in beds. They can't, when they greet you, they shouldn't be jumping. So our job in that case is to just reinforce those rules per se. So if the program teaches us to correct those situations. So if every time Gabriel's greeting somebody, dogs have a tendency to get excited and they jump up, well, we have to limit that from happening. And eventually, it's amazing over time. They learn really quickly. So following the rules is important, and then they give us a list of commands, a short list of commands like sit and stay and just the basic commands. It's funny, not funny, but it's interesting that Gabriel will learn about 50 different commands by the time
All told, by the time he's done. Yeah.
And I only know a short, a small version, because again, my job is more to socialize the dog, but we also need to reinforce those basic commands.
How about switching from person to person? Are you the exclusive caregiver, or does Caitlin help, or your wife, or anybody?
This has been a family project. Generally, it is me who is the caregiver. Caitlin does help as well in the households. There's an age limit, so you have to be, I believe it's 18 to manage the dogs in public, and that's for safety reasons as well. So generally, Gabriel's by my side all the time, but I do get a lot of good help from my family as well.
What happens if a dog doesn't perform well?
So there's a few things that dogs fail. The program is very strict, making sure that the dogs are truly ready to be service dogs, because they're going to be out in the environment, and we want to make sure that everybody around them is safe and secure. So the two things that the dogs generally fail for may be a medical issue. So, for example, labs tend to have hip issues a lot of times. So if the program doesn't feel like they're physically able to help a person, they'll have to be released from the program. And then at the end of the day, some of the dogs just like chasing balls or being a dog, and they see squirrels, and we, as much as we try to break them from wanting to do those things, it's just inevitable that we may not be able to. So at that point, they may be released as well.
Do you feel sad when the dog goes home or goes back to the prison on the week after the weekend?
I mean, I love him to death. It's almost like though having a baby. Sometimes it's a little bit of work on the weekends, so I enjoy having him, but I also know that this is more of a long the project in regards to strategic as far as working to make sure that he can go to a client. So, of course, I miss him during the week, but at the end of the day, I know that he's continuing to get that training, so eventually he's going to help out somebody with a disability.
This is perfect for training you to be a grandparent.
Yes,
it sounds exactly. You have him and you drop him off, and you just let him go to the training. Go back to your training.
Exactly.
Yep, that's perfect.
I mean, it's great being a weekend puppy raiser, but you have to realize when you're doing it, it is work during the weekend, because everything you do usually involves the dog, because that's how they get the training. So you just have to keep that in mind if you want to take on a role like this.
So if you just need a screwdriver down at the hardware store, now it's
right. It's
put him in his
get them
coat.
ready and take them out. Right.
Yeah.
And you can take breaks, but your goal is to bring them into those environments.
Right.
So you really should, take them with you. And obviously there's some times where we'll just, he needs crate time. He needs to practice how to live in his crate and speak, so we'll do that too. But, so it's not all work, but it is a responsibility that you have to consider when you take on a role like this.
You must have a very big crate for him, because he's a pretty tall dog.
Yes.
Let's have him stand up.
Gabriel, stand.
See how tall I am? See how tall I am? And you did a good job. You want to talk? Does he learn?
And he's only 15 months old.
Okay.
So sit.
Good job. And so you're digging in your pocket for a kibble, because that's a reward basis, right? This is how they're trained.
The program down. The program is a positive reward system. So we stay away from negative corrections and always work to positively reward when he does something correctly. And it's working.
Yeah, he's a handsome dog. He really is. Now, when he is carrying this jacket, coat, well, I can't remember what we called it, but at any rate, it's not like those backpack kinds of things that some of the service dogs get. But you don't know what kind of service dog he is going to be ultimately, right?
I don't. Generally, if the dogs are going to be, if the program knows the dog's going to go for a hearing disability, I may have learned that earlier, but right now they want me focused on continuing just the basic training and letting the inmates in the program start doing the specialty stuff. And so he may have a backpack eventually. The reason he may not have it now is they feel he's still too young to have one. But if that's what they feel they need, they'll start sending him out with a backpack.
Black Labs, or Labs, period, are just the sweetest dogs. Unbelievable.
That's the other thing about the program that I really love is that they obviously get their dogs from very responsible breeders, and most of the dogs come from the Guiding Light Foundation, which is in New York, and they breed specifically just service dogs. So their temperament, they're very mellow, they have a good temperament, and as you can see, very easy to have around.
I swear he looks so much like Basket that I have to think he's got to be a cross between a traditional lab and an English lab, because he's got that square head.
Yeah.
Or else he's all English, I don't know. He's just handsome. So now, how much longer do you have him?
So the dogs usually train from 18 to 24 months. No. See, there's the no. So we don't like him pawing, because he's not allowed to paw. No. The dogs usually train 18 to 24 months. And it depends. He's a very mature for his age, so he may go a little earlier, be assigned a little earlier. But it's generally about 2 years. And in total, the dogs generally receive the equivalence of about $40,000 worth of training, with all the time and the money spent on it, which I think is an important factor in this, because the dogs are really trained to be out in society. They spend a lot of time not only making sure they're going to help that client, but making sure they're not going to be a danger to anybody out there when they go to the restaurants.
Well, we're acting up just a little bit, huh? Yeah, we're getting a little bit excited here. Let me just, for a moment, I'm gonna talk about the receiving end. That is to say, so a dog has been properly trained and is now available for hire, so to speak, or adoption is the right way, I guess. For our family, the goal was that we had to raise $10,000, and we raised between $4,000 and $4,500 very easily with family and friends and so forth. We put a posting on the Needs webpage with a picture of Jake and why we thought it was important for Jake to have a dog. And somehow we got an unexpected but oh so wonderful phone call that our full commitment of $10,000 had been paid, and that there was an anonymous donor who gave the balance of the money. I'm confident we could have raised the money, and I always felt a little bit guilty, but it was like, wow, that means now that we don't have to wait, because that's really the hard part. Once you've made the decision that you want to have this this special little dog or, whatever, come and live with your, in my case, an autistic kid, then all of a sudden it's like you want it now, and I'm sure that if you're a vet, and that's another group that really takes a lot of dogs from needs, veterans. Have you had any direct contact with any of those folks?
Coincidentally, so for the veterans, the needs program provides the dogs for free. There is no cost, and I'm glad to hear about your experience because they do try to make sure that money isn't a factor in any case. So they do help with the fundraising and stuff, and it's exciting to hear what happened there. I mean, it's working. But when I'm out with Gabriel, I do meet with a lot of folks, and I was out with, and one veteran had approached me and brought me to tears. I mean, she was in Iraq, was in the battles. She came home and she was under severe PTSD where she couldn't leave her house. She tried to commit suicide multiple times, and she said it was miserable, and to the point where her family couldn't leave her alone, and to the point where her daughter didn't want to even go to college because she knew that mom would be home alone. So she obtained the service dog and is now out in public. Her daughter is in college, was comfortable to leave her alone at this point, and is just helping, you see the dogs, the guide dogs, and the physical, helping with physical disabilities, but a lot of times the vets just really need that companionship and somebody to, when they are getting stressed, to just be there to calm them down, and the dogs are so well trained to do that.
I know it's not a needs dog, but there was a video going around recently about a woman who suffers from syncope, I think is what it's called, is when your heart really slows way down and you kind of pass out. The dog recognizes the changes in her breathing pattern and has been trained to signal for her to lie down. And then when she lies down, the dog gets under her legs so that she's getting blood back up to her heart and so forth. I mean, it's just remarkable, and it's very, very touching, and it is emotional.
Yes, I mean, and the especially we have dogs going to kids on the autism spectrum or with anxiety and depression, and they really can sense that.
Yep.
They really get, and then they know when the right time is. I mean, we all have our bad days, and I've had times where I was just sitting there, and all of a sudden Gabriel just comes up to me because he knew I needed some companionship, and it's just amazing.
It is, and I think the social dogs, we do think of it in terms of people who need physical support and so forth, and that's easy to see: the blind, the deaf, the somehow incapacitated in a wheelchair, whatever. But that emotional piece is harder to identify, and it's harder to know how to treat in a way that is socially acceptable. And the thing about Basket was that if Jake was with Basket, Jake knew how to interact because people weren't coming up to talk to him. He didn't have to worry about whether he was looking them in the eyes or whether he was doing the right thing or whatever all those things were going around. All he had to do was look at the dog, and so people would say, "What's her name?" And he'd have to learn to say Basket, and the dog was his way into society. And today at 17, he's able to make it through school and high school and normal circumstances and so forth. And Basket deserves a lot of credit for that.
Yeah, and that's I meet a lot of folks with disabilities who are in wheelchairs, and not only getting comfortable, not only are they helping obviously with the servicing part, but what most often they say to me is that they're not the center of attention anymore, because if you're in a wheelchair, if you have a physical disability, they're feeling like they're always looked at. But now that they have a dog next to them, that attention seems to be taken away, so they feel more comfortable being out in the environment, which is another amazing, help what the dogs are doing.
There was something on the radio the other day about some business that would rent dogs to guys that were looking for girls. And so they'd be the chick attractor, The business was closed because it's an inappropriate use. But at any rate, the point is, animals really are icebreakers.
Yes, yes.
And these
we get a lot of attention when we're out, and especially when we're doing those classes and we have 10 or 15 dogs at the Natick Mall. It gets pretty interesting, you know.
Yeah.
It gets a little.
You probably attract a group, right?
Yeah.
So then how do the dogs respond in that situation?
Well, that's part of the training, is to see how they do respond, and generally they respond just like this. They're pretty used to it, and that's our goal, is to keep taking them out. Like, one of the things that Gabriel's struggling a little bit right now with is pet stores, because of the smells and other animals, and mostly just because of the smells. So my job is to just keep going back to that pet store, to eventually he comes to a point where he walks in and he's very comfortable. So they do react very positively. You know, it depends on their age. We have 4 or 5 month old puppies that are still learning it, and then we have the older dogs like Gabriel here, but they react very well.
Well, I can honestly say that I have a bunny that lives in my house, and the dog doesn't pay any particular attention to him. You know, it's a wabbit. At any rate, well, let's see. Have we covered everything that we'd like people to know? Is there anything else that we need to get out there? We'll add the website, you know, and so forth, so people can get a hold of that.
No, I think you'll see the different ways that if you're interested in helping needs, you can either become a weekend puppy raiser, you can make donations, obviously, but you can also even sponsor a dog. So I believe there's an ability to provide a donation, and then you can name the dog. So Gabriel has a sponsor. That's why he's named Gabriel, and that sponsor gets pictures every week of how Gabriel's doing and things like that. So there are various ways, but the program does need help. We don't want money to be a restrictor in getting a service dog, and obviously it takes a lot of investment into these dogs. So we can always use the help.
All right. Matt, thank you very much for doing this with me. And I don't want to disturb the poor dog, because if he is just completely out now, and he's got his little ear over his eye, so he's totally comfortable. It took him a little bit, but at any rate. Okay, so thank you for visiting with us, and we'll see you next time.